At just 30 years old, Mary Whitlock wasn't remembered as a woman of faith. She was whispered about in fear. In the Appalachian hills, people crossed themselves when her name was spoken, because what she did behind convent walls was too evil for history books. The coal dust settled over Harlan County like a shroud that September morning in 1952, but Sister Mary Whitlock didn't notice. She had more pressing concerns than the perpetual gray film that coated everything in eastern Kentucky. Standing at barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, 30 years old, and wearing the traditional black habit of the Sisters of Charity, she surveyed the abandoned mining company store that would become her battlefield. "This'll do," she said, her voice carrying the peculiar lilt of someone who'd grown up in these mountains, but had spent the last decade trying to sand down the accent in Louisville's convents. "We'll start here." Her companion, Sister Agnes, a gentle soul 20 years her senior, wrung her hands nervously. "But Sister Mary, the company men said we're not welcome. They said—" "I heard what they said." Mary's jaw set in a line that would become famous throughout Appalachia. "They don't get to decide where God's work gets done." That morning marked the beginning of a legend. Within 3 years, Mary Whitlock would be known as the Hammer throughout coal country, a nun who struck fear into the hearts of mine owners, corrupt politicians, and anyone else who stood between her and justice for the mountain people she'd sworn to serve. But the path that led her to that abandoned store, and the crusade that would follow, began long before, in circumstances that would have broken a lesser spirit. Mary Catherine Whitlock was born in 1922 in a hollow so narrow that sunlight only reached the bottom for 3 hours a day. Her father, James Whitlock, worked the mines like his father before him, coming home each evening covered in black dust, coughing into rags that Mary's mother would boil and scrub, only to have them stained dark again the next day. The Whitlocks were poor even by Appalachian standards. Mary was the 4th of 9 children, though only 6 would survive past their 5th birthday. She learned early that life in the mountains was hard, that children died of preventable diseases, that men went into the mines healthy and came out broken, that women aged decades in mere years from the relentless work of keeping families alive on company scrip and prayers. But Mary was different. Even as a child, she possessed a fierce intelligence and an even fiercer sense of justice. When she was 8, she watched the mine doctor, paid by the company, declare her father fit to work despite lungs that rattled like dice in a cup. That night, she told her mother, "When I grow up, I'm going to make them pay for what they do to us." "Hush, child," her mother had whispered, glancing toward the window as if the company bosses might be listening. "Talk like that gets people hurt." Mary didn't hush. She couldn't. She attended the one-room schoolhouse when she could, though often she was kept home to help with washing or minding the younger children. But when she was there, she absorbed everything like a sponge soaking up water. The teacher, Miss Harriet Brewster, recognized something special in the intense girl with the coal-black hair and eyes that seemed to look right through you. "Mary Whitlock," Miss Brewster told her mother one day, "is the brightest student I've ever taught. She should go on to high school, maybe even college." Sarah Whitlock had laughed, a sound without humor. "On what money? We can barely feed them all as it is." But Miss Brewster was persistent, And when Mary was 13, she arranged for the girl to receive a scholarship to attend a Catholic high school in Lexington. It meant leaving home, living with the sisters who ran the school, working in the convent kitchen to earn her keep. It meant leaving her family, her mountains, everything she knew. Mary went without hesitation. At Sacred Heart Academy, Mary Whitlock discovered two things that would define her life: God and fury. The nuns who taught her spoke of a Jesus who overturned the money changers' tables, who dined with sinners and outcasts, who reserved his harshest words for hypocrites and those who oppressed the poor. This was a faith she could embrace, but it was the fury that truly shaped her. In Lexington, she saw how the rest of Kentucky lived. She saw children whose bellies weren't distended from hunger, fathers who came home from work without coughing blood, mothers who didn't look ancient at 35. The contrast with Goose Creek burned in her gut like acid. "Why does God allow it?" she demanded of Sister Margaret, the nun who served as her mentor and confessor. "Why do my people suffer while others prosper?" Sister Margaret, a formidable woman in her own right, didn't offer platitudes. "God doesn't allow it, child. People allow it. Greedy people, indifferent people, people who benefit from the suffering of others. God calls us to fight against such injustice." "Then that's what I'll do," Mary said. "I'll fight." She graduated at the top of her class in 1940. World War II was raging in Europe, and America would soon join the fight. Many of her classmates married quickly or took jobs in factories supporting the war effort. Mary Whitlock took her vows and joined the Sisters of Charity. The order was initially unsure what to do with her. She was brilliant but intense, compassionate but angry, deeply faithful, but impatient with what she saw as the church's failures to address social injustice. They sent her to teach at a Catholic school in Louisville, thinking that classroom work might channel her energies productively. For nearly a decade, Mary taught mathematics, science, history, and she was excellent at it. But she grew restless. Louisville was comfortable, safe. Her students were from working families, sure, but they had enough to eat, shoes on their feet, futures that held more than black lung and early graves. Meanwhile, back in the mountains, her people were still suffering. She wrote letters to her superiors. She made requests. She argued, cajoled, and yes, demanded. Finally, in 1952, when the Mother Superior was likely just tired of her persistence, Mary got what she wanted: permission to return to eastern Kentucky and establish a mission in coal country. She was 30 years old, and she was going home. The abandoned company store in Harlan County was a wreck. The roof leaked, the windows were broken, and mice had made homes in every corner. But it was free. The mining company had simply abandoned it, and it was hers. Mary and Sister Agnes spent their first week scrubbing, patching, and praying. Word spread quickly through the hollers that the nuns had arrived. The reaction was mixed. The mining families were cautiously hopeful, the company men were suspicious, and the mine owners were actively hostile. Mary's plan was simple in concept, revolutionary in execution. She would establish a clinic, a school, and a community center, all free of company control. She would bring in doctors who weren't on the company payroll, teachers who could teach children about their rights, and social workers who could help families navigate the deliberately complex systems designed to keep them dependent. the mine owners saw this for exactly what it was, a threat to their power. The first warning came on a Tuesday. A company foreman, a thick-necked man named Dutch Brennan, showed up at the store with 2 armed men. "You need to leave," he told Mary, not bothering with pleasantries. "This is company property, and you're trespassing." Mary, who had been organizing medical supplies, didn't even look up. "This building was abandoned. I have documentation from the county showing it's being claimed by the church under Kentucky's adverse possession laws. Unless you have a deed that says otherwise, I suggest you leave." Dutch's face reddened. "Listen here, sister." Now Mary looked up, and there was something in her eyes that made Dutch take an involuntary step backward. "No, you listen. I grew up in these mountains. My father died coughing up pieces of his lungs after 30 years in your mines. My brothers work in those same mines, breathing the same poison, living under the same oppression. I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience to God, not to coal companies. This mission stays open, and if you want to remove me, you'll have to do it by force. And if you do, I promise you, the newspapers in Louisville, Lexington, and Washington, D.C. will hear about the coal company that beat up a nun. Now get out of my clinic." Dutch Brennan left, but Mary knew this was just the beginning. The harassment started small. Deliveries of supplies mysteriously went missing. Workers who helped with repairs suddenly had their shifts at the mine changed. Families who visited the clinic found their company's scrip reduced. Mary fought back with a weapon the companies hadn't anticipated: publicity. She had kept her contacts from Louisville, including several journalists who'd been looking for a way into the sealed-off world of Appalachian coal mining. Now she gave them one. The first article appeared in the Louisville Courier-Journal in October 1952. "Nun battles coal company to bring health care to Harlan." It was followed by stories in the Lexington Herald and eventually picked up by the Associated Press. Suddenly, the nation was watching Harlan County. The companies couldn't simply shut down the clinic now, not without proving everything Mary was saying about them. So they changed tactics. If they couldn't force her out, they'd undermine her mission by making it irrelevant. The company announced it would be improving its own medical facilities, hiring more doctors, and reducing the fees charged to workers. On paper, it looked like a victory for Mary. In practice, it was a trap. "Don't trust them," Mary warned the families who came to her clinic. "These are the same people who've been poisoning you for generations. They're only making these promises because they're afraid the moment we let our guard down, they'll take it all back." But some people did trust the company promises. The clinic's patient load dropped. Mary watched families who desperately needed independent medical care return to company doctors who would declare men fit for work even as they coughed up blood. It broke her heart, but it also hardened her resolve. The turning point came in the winter of 1953. A mine collapsed in a neighboring county, trapping 17 men underground. The company's rescue efforts were half-hearted at best. The mine had been operating with known safety violations, and the owners were more concerned with avoiding liability than saving lives. Mary heard about the collapse on the radio. Without hesitation, she loaded Sister Agnes into their battered truck and drove through a snowstorm to the mine site. What she found there radicalized her completely. Families were kept behind barricades, given no information about the rescue efforts. Company men with guns prevented anyone from getting close to the mine entrance. The official rescue team worked slowly, reluctantly, as if they'd already written off the trapped men. Mary walked right past the barricades. "Mom, sister, you can't be here," a security guard said, moving to block her path. "Those are men down there," Mary said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Human beings with families, and you're treating them like they're already dead because it's cheaper and easier than actually trying to save them." "Sister, please," the guard said, uncomfortable now, with the crowd watching. "No." Mary's voice rose. "I won't be quiet. I won't be complicit. You want to stop me, arrest me, put a nun in handcuffs in front of all these people, in front of the reporters who just arrived. See how that looks in tomorrow's papers." She'd noticed the news crews arriving, drawn by reports of the collapse. Now she walked directly toward the cameras. "My name is Sister Mary Whitlock," she said, looking directly into the lens. "I'm from these mountains. My father was a miner, and I'm here to tell you what these companies don't want you to know. They value coal more than they value human life. There are 17 men trapped down there, and this company is more concerned with protecting its profits than saving them. This is murder. This is what happens when we allow corporations to treat human beings as disposable." It was the most devastating 30 seconds of television ever broadcast from Appalachia. The rescue operation suddenly became urgent. The company brought in additional crews. All 17 men were pulled out alive within 18 hours. And Mary Whitlock became a national figure. In the aftermath of the mine collapse, donations poured into Mary's mission. The clinic expanded. She brought in more sisters, more doctors, nurses, teachers, and social workers. But Mary wasn't satisfied with just providing services. She wanted to fundamentally change the power structure that kept the mountain people oppressed. She began organizing. Every week, she held meetings in the community center. She taught workers about their rights under federal labor laws that the companies routinely ignored. She helped families document safety violations. She connected them with lawyers willing to take on the coal companies. The mine owners fought back. They spread rumors that Mary was a communist, a serious accusation in 1954. They pressured the Catholic Church to recall her. They threatened to shut down the mines entirely if the agitation continued. Mary responded by escalating. She led her first march in the spring of 1954. 300 miners and their families walking to the county courthouse to demand enforcement of safety regulations. She stood on the courthouse steps in her habit and delivered a speech that would be remembered for generations. "They call me a radical," she said. "They call me a troublemaker. They say I'm stirring up discontent. Let me tell you what I'm really doing. I'm reminding you that you're human beings with dignity and rights. I'm reminding you that God didn't put you on this earth to be ground up and spit out by machines that make rich men richer. I'm reminding you that you have power, the power of solidarity, the power of your labor, the power of your voices raised together." She paused, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of hundreds. They fear me not because I'm dangerous, but because you're dangerous. Because when you realize your own worth, when you stand together, when you refuse to accept oppression as your birthright, that's when everything changes. So, yes, I'm a troublemaker, and I invite every one of you to join me in this trouble. Let's cause so much trouble that they can't ignore us anymore. Let's cause so much trouble that they have to treat us like human beings. The crowd erupted in cheers. The nickname, the Hammer, emerged from that period. Some say it was because she hit hard and didn't miss. Others say it was because she used to pound her fist on the table during negotiations, making demands that left no room for compromise. Mary herself never confirmed the origin, but she didn't discourage it either. Being feared, she learned, was useful. What the public didn't see was what this crusade cost Mary Whitlock personally. She worked 18-hour days, survived on 4 hours of sleep, and pushed herself until her body broke down. She had ulcers from the stress, chronic headaches from the tension, and a persistent cough that her doctor, an ally who volunteered at the clinic, warned might be the early signs of the same lung disease that killed her father. She had no personal life. Her vows of poverty meant she owned nothing but her habit and a single rosary. Her vow of chastity meant she would never have the family she sometimes imagined in her weakest moments. Her vow of obedience was constantly in tension with her superiors, who admired her work but worried about her methods and her safety. She received death threats regularly. Twice, shots were fired at the clinic. Warnings, she assumed, since they hit walls rather than people. Her truck's brake lines were cut. She found a dead crow nailed to the clinic door with a note that read, "Next time it'll be you." Sister Agnes begged her to be more careful, to perhaps tone down the rhetoric, to work within the system rather than against it. "The system is designed to break us," Mary replied. "You can't reform something that's working exactly as intended. We have to break it and build something new." But the violence did affect her. She started having nightmares, dreams where she was trapped in collapsed mines, where children starved while she watched helplessly, where her father's ghost accused her of not doing enough. She woke up gasping, reached for her rosary, and prayed for strength to make it through another day. In her lowest moment, late one night in the winter of 1955, she knelt in the empty chapel of the clinic and had what she would later describe as a crisis of faith. "Is this what you want from me?" she asked God, tears streaming down her face. "To fight until I'm destroyed, to sacrifice everything and everyone, including myself. I'm so tired, I'm so angry all the time, I don't know if I'm doing your work or just feeding my own rage." She waited in the silence for an answer that didn't come in words, but in a feeling, a deep, abiding certainty that this was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do, no matter the cost. Mary Whitlock stood up from that prayer a changed woman. The doubts didn't disappear, but her commitment became absolute. She would see this through to whatever end awaited her. The confrontation that would define Mary's legacy came in the summer of 1956. Workers at the 3 largest mines in Harlan County walked off the job, demanding better safety conditions, fair wages, and the right to unionize without retaliation. The companies responded with mass evictions, families thrown out of company housing, denied access to company stores, cut off from everything. Hundreds of men, women and children suddenly had nowhere to go. Mary opened every building associated with the mission. The clinic became a dormitory, the school became a shelter, the community center became a soup kitchen. She called in every favor she had, contacted every journalist, and made appeals on national radio. The nation responded. Donations of food, clothing, and money flooded in. Volunteers arrived to help. The strikers held firm. But the companies had one more card to play. They convinced a local judge, a man whose campaign they'd funded, to issue an injunction against the strike, declaring it illegal and ordering workers back to their jobs. When the workers refused, the judge ordered the arrest of strike leaders. Mary knew what was coming next. The companies would use the law itself as a weapon, breaking the strike by breaking the strikers. So she did something unprecedented. She called a meeting of every striker and made them an offer. "They're going to arrest your leaders," she told them. "They're going to try to break you by taking away the people you look to for guidance. But what if they had to arrest all of us? What if they had to arrest a nun?" The plan was simple. Mary would lead a march to the judge's courthouse. She would be at the front, in her habit, making it impossible for them to disperse the crowd without confronting a woman of God. Sister Agnes and the other sisters begged her not to do it. Her superiors explicitly forbade it. Mary went anyway. On a hot August morning, Sister Mary Whitlock led 2,000 men, women, and children through the streets of Harlan. She walked at the front, carrying a cross, singing, "We shall overcome," in a voice that never wavered. The police were waiting at the courthouse. The sheriff, a nervous man who'd never dealt with anything like this, ordered the crowd to disperse. Mary kept walking. "Sister, I'm warning you," the sheriff said. "I have orders to arrest anyone who doesn't leave." "Then arrest me," Mary said, stopping directly in front of them. "Arrest a nun for demanding that human beings be treated with dignity. Arrest me for feeding hungry children. Arrest me for standing with the oppressed. And then live with the consequences of that choice." The sheriff hesitated. The national news cameras rolled. The moment stretched taut. Finally, the sheriff stepped aside. The strikers surged forward, surrounding the courthouse, their voices raised in song and prayer. They stayed for 3 days, sleeping on the courthouse lawn, refusing to leave until their demands were met. On the 4th day, representatives from the mining companies arrived to negotiate. Within a week, an agreement was reached. The workers got their safety improvements, a wage increase, and recognition of their right to organize. It wasn't everything they demanded, but it was more than anyone had thought possible. Mary Whitlock had won the victory in Harlan County, established Mary as a legend throughout Appalachia. Over the next 2 decades, she would lead dozens of similar campaigns. She expanded the mission to 5 different counties. She trained other sisters and organizers in her methods. She became a fixture at congressional hearings on mining safety and poverty, but she paid a price for her victories. The Catholic Church, while proud of her work, was increasingly uncomfortable with her methods. There were investigations, reprimands, threats of excommunication. Mary navigated it all with the same fierce determination she brought to everything, neither backing down nor quite breaking with the institution she'd devoted her life to. Her health deteriorated. The lung problems worsened. By her 50s, she needed supplemental oxygen, but she kept working, kept organizing, kept fighting. When asked once, late in life, if she regretted the sacrifices she'd made, Mary's response was characteristically direct. Regret? What would I regret? That I didn't live an easier life. That I didn't turn away from suffering when I could have. The only thing I'd regret is if I'd done nothing while people suffered. My life has been hard, yes, but it's been true. It's been faithful. It's been exactly what it needed to be. Sister Mary Whitlock died in 1994 at the age of 72 from complications related to pulmonary fibrosis, the same disease that killed her father. Her funeral was attended by thousands. Miners carried her casket. Former governors spoke at her service. But perhaps the most moving tribute came from an elderly woman who'd been a child during the Great Strike. Sister Mary saved my family, she said simply, not just from hunger or eviction, but from hopelessness. She taught us we were worth fighting for. She taught us we were worth something. I don't know what happened to that little girl who would have grown up believing she was worthless. But I know who I became, and it's because of her. Today, the mission Mary founded still operates, though in different form. The mines are mostly closed now, victims of mechanization and changing energy markets. But the poverty remains, and so does the need. The legend of the hammer lives on, a 5'2" nun who struck fear into the hearts of the powerful and hope into the hearts of the powerless. She was complex, difficult, sometimes harsh, always uncompromising. She was also brave, compassionate, and utterly committed to the radical idea that every human being deserves dignity. At just 30 years old, Mary Whitlock returned to the mountains that made her and began a crusade that would transform them. She became feared because she refused to accept injustice as inevitable. She became beloved because she never stopped believing in the worth of the people everyone else had written off. Her story is a reminder that one person, armed with faith and fury, really can change the world. It won't be easy. It won't be comfortable, but it can be done. And sometimes the smallest people cast the longest shadows.